oi nii!
Sina usun endasse, arukate arvaamisse.
Estonia, the small Baltic country known today for technological innovation, saunas, and trying desperately to be the next Nordic country. But Estonia's history as an independent country is relatively short for such a unique and prosperous nation, only gaining sovereignty in 1991 from the USSR after centuries of being passed around by regional powers. And get this, they won their independence by singing. So how did this tiny country keep a national identity without any autonomy for so long, and why did their singing revolution work? To understand how Estonia managed to stage a peaceful revolution with the power of song, we have to look back at the land's history. Alright, let's rapid fire some Estonian history. Okay, so first, the Stone to Bronze Ages. Pagan Estonians inhabited the area and developed something similar to Viking culture. They are known for being extremely tough and even stopped Swedish Vikings from taking over. Then, in the 1200s, Germans came up to convert them to Christianity as they were one of the last strongholds of paganism in Europe. Estonia stayed a mix of Livonian and Danish rule until the entire region was owned by the Livonian Germans in 1346, who made up the upper class while Estonians were serfs. After this, Estonia was pretty much taken over by everyone in the area. Poland, Lithuania, Sweden, and finally Russia in 1710. Between the Swedish takeover and the Great Northern War, which saw Estonia change hands from Sweden to Russia, around 50% of Estonia's population had been killed. The Russians also permitted the German ruling class to maintain the rule and subjugation of the Estonian people. German wasn't only the dominant people group, but also the dominant language, as all business and government had to be in German. However, Estonians remained defiant and held on to their culture, music, and language. Shortly after serfdom was abolished, at the start of the 1850s, a wave of Estonian nationalism, known as the Estonian Cultural Awakening, began, when intellectuals and artists began to openly celebrate Estonian culture. The Sons of Serfs even compiled Estonia's national epic, filled with folk songs, poems, and stories. Things started to get even better for Estonians when they saw their chance to leave Russia's control as they were caught up in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. They declared independence, and after a 2-year-long war, Estonia was independent for the first time in over 700 years. Unfortunately, Stalin was not going to let Estonia stay free for long, as only 20 years later, in 1939, Estonia was taken over by the USSR in one of the early invasions of World War II. Over the 51-year occupation, Estonian culture and language was heavily suppressed, and ethnic Russians were even forcibly settled in Estonia to dilute the population. While Estonians resisted as much as possible, it wasn't until the 80s that the resistance became a movement. Estonians have existed in the same location with the same language for nearly 5,000 years. However, as you heard in the brief history overview, the last 1,000 years have been marked by oppression by foreign nations. Before the 17th century, nothing was recorded in Estonian, as the Germanic elites tried to limit the use of the language as much as possible, and the first writings were folk songs. Song was the heart of the entire peaceful revolution against the Soviets. So, why was music the main vehicle for freedom from Russia in the late 80s? Why was it the singing revolution? Estonia's ties with folk music date back to the pagan roots of the culture, becoming prominent before the Viking Age. When the Germanic Livonians took control of Estonia to convert them to Christianity, they also repressed their culture, mainly folk songs. Under the Germans as serfs, Estonians continued to sing their folk songs as an act of defiance against their oppressors. This continued until the abolition of serfdom under the Russian Empire, which is when the Estonian Cultural Awakening occurred. Prominent Estonian composers created high volumes of nationalistic music for the first time in hundreds of years. This ultimately culminated in the creation of the Estonian Song Festival. The first Estonian Song Festival, or Laulupidu in Estonian, I think I pronounced that right, now an intrinsic part of the national identity of Estonia, was held in 1869. People from across the country gathered in Tallinn in an outdoor amphitheater to hear Estonian folk music. They were allowed by the Russian government with the understanding that most of the songs would be in Russian, not Estonian. However, many performers sang songs that were supposed to be in Russian in Estonian as an act of rebellion. These festivals would continue to occur every 5 years, becoming more about freedom and Estonian culture as the years went on. These festivals helped generate a new level of patriotism that eventually inspired Estonia to declare independence in 1918. During the interwar period, Laulupidu and thus folk music became a core part of Estonian identity due to the association with the independence movement. During this newfound independence, Estonian music exploded into music clubs, jazz, and other popular Western music, showing off just how free they had become. So if Estonia had such a strong sense of national identity, why did it take them 50 years to organize a revolt against their Soviet oppressors? The immediate aftermath of the Soviet invasion saw a general sense of defeat and hopelessness, which severely limited the people's ability to unite. Small-scale protests and other acts of defiance did occur, but by and large, Estonians just tried to make the best of their situation. By the 70s, Estonia was known within the Soviet Union as the gateway to the West, due to it being the most liberal place in the country, even having access to Finnish television. People from all over the USSR came to Estonia to experience a glimpse of what it was like to live in a Western nation. While this was making Estonians even more pro-West than before, the USSR started focusing their energy on other spheres of influence, notably their invasion of Afghanistan, which was extremely costly and intensive. At the same time, the Soviet Union was becoming economically weaker, which again made Estonians even more pro-West and pro-independence. It was at this point that the USSR also began implementing far harsher regulation on Estonian language use, fully attempting to erase the Estonian identity. This was the last straw for the Baltic nation, as they joined with the other repressed Baltic states to assert their independence. This only escalated as the Soviets' grip started to loosen in other domains, like the Berlin Wall coming down and Romania ending their communist regime. Estonia finally had enough, and the singing revolution officially began in 1987.
Et Saaremaa näeb õhtupäikse õitsimist.
In 1987, tensions finally reached a boiling point when citizens learned that the Soviet government of Estonia was having plans to start mining operations across the entire northern woods of the country. This also meant that large numbers of Russian workers would also be brought in. This infuriated the public, who raised environmental concerns as well as concerns about Estonian identity being jeopardized with the influx of Russians. This caused the first wave of protests, culminating in Almo Matisen and Jüri Lesman debuting their 5 patriotic songs, which were based off traditional choral and folk music at the Song Festival in Tartu in 1988. These songs ended up being sung by Estonians from all over the country, also inspiring the other 2 Baltic states to emulate these songs. As these songs spread around the country, a giant wave of patriotism spread throughout. The nation was continuing its tradition of singing in the face of oppression. Now, with the 3 Baltic nations united in their fight for freedom, they held the Baltic Way protest, where a fourth of the population from all 3 Baltic nations joined hands connecting their 3 capital cities by one of the biggest human chains ever made. Flag waving and singing songs, this chain of people captivated the world, the defiance of one of the most powerful countries in the world. More and more Estonian pop artists were making patriotic music and performing them live across the country, with tens of thousands singing along with them. In neighboring Latvia, several protesters had been killed, which led to them to declare independence first. Estonia quickly followed suit and declared independence a few months later, becoming the second country to leave the Soviet Union. In a last-ditch effort to reclaim the Baltic state, the Soviet military attempted to seize the radio and broadcasting tower to play propaganda across the country, but they were stopped by an Estonian human shield. And after a short standoff, the Soviets left, for good. Miraculously, by the end of the revolution, Estonia was the only Baltic state to suffer no casualties, making it a 100% peaceful revolution. So despite constant occupation from foreign powers, Estonia managed to maintain its national identity through its tradition of folk music and the persistence of the Estonian language. These factors allowed Estonia to stage the peaceful singing revolution against the Soviet Union, where they used folk songs and displayed unity as a form of mass protest. The singing revolution became a catalyst event as it inspired the civil disobedience movement of the Eastern Bloc and inspired Moldova to begin their own singing revolution. This culminated in the complete collapse of the Soviet Union in late 1991. In modern times, it continues to be a source of inspiration, as seen most recently by protesters in Hong Kong emulating the Baltic Way by creating a chain across the city. Estonia continues to be firm in holding on to their national sovereignty to this day, as they joined NATO back in 2004 and now is giving the most money to Ukraine per capita out of any nation to fight back against Russia, proving that Estonia will not soon forget the importance of national sovereignty. They've cemented themselves as a country willing to fight for themselves and others in pursuit of freedom and song.